9th. I'd like to thank all the members of the Budget and Finance Committee and other members of the Metro Council for attending today. Thank you. Thank you for coming. We're going to start today with the Finance Department, and with the Finance Department we have before us Mr. Richard Riebling, the Director of Finance, Mr. Gene Nolan, the Deputy Director, and Ms. Talia Lomax O'Neill. Help me pronounce that, Talia. That's correct? All right, thank you. Deputy Director also. Before you begin your presentation, Mr. Riebling, are you satisfied with the mayor's proposal for your department? I'm sorry. Go right.
Let me say, Councilman and members of the council, we are extremely satisfied with the budget that the mayor presented. I have just a few couple comments I would like to make, and first of all, as I try to do, and I often forget, I do want to thank all of the employees of the finance department for the job they do. Obviously, they have a behind-the-scene role in this government, but they play an unbelievably critical function to make this government operate. And without them, the city would not be in as strong a financial position as it is today. And along that line, especially want to thank the work of my two deputy directors who are sitting up here with me today, both of whom bring unbelievable amount of experience, intelligence, and wisdom that whatever success we have, they lead the way, and I appreciate it very much. We obviously can live with the budget. We're taking about a 1.8% reduction. We had four people retire during the incentive program, all of which we'll be able to recover by the end of this current fiscal year by hiring at lower positions, lower salaries. We've been able to continue to do more with less, which is the motto that we have preached to the rest of the government. So with that, Councilman, I'd be happy to answer any questions that members of the council may have.
Thank you, Mr. Riebling. Councilman Stein.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Nolan, what number budget is this for you?
Well, I've been here 40 years, so I think it's about 40.
40. That's extraordinary. That is absolutely extraordinary. The Treasurer's Office is technically part of the Finance Department, or is it independent?
No, it's part of the Finance Department.
Okay. And the Treasurer, what are the responsibilities of the Treasurer?
Treasurer oversees cash management. They're involved in bond transactions. They're involved in the operations of the benefit board, the investments of the pension funds, overseeing the pension fund operations. Treasury management. What else did I leave out? Banking relation, or banking, just our overall banking relationship, as well as those are now they've taken on the added responsibility with the legislation passed by the council last year of collecting some of the taxes, the hotel taxes.
That was going to be my question. The role of the Treasurer has expanded over the years, has it not?
Well, that historically was a role, and then the council moved some of those functions to the clerk's office. And
that's right.
On things last year, we moved it back to the Treasurer's office.
Okay, thank you. And the only place taking an internal service fee hit in your office is the Treasurer's office?
I'll have to defer that to Mr. Lomax O'Neill to answer that question.
We have
The microphone in front of you is on.
the Treasurer's Office is receiving some increases, particularly because the collections function has now been formalized and has been put in place. But the rest of the Finance Department is also seeing an increase in internal service fees, particularly around ITS and building operations and support.
Okay, I'm sorry, I just missed it. I just wanted to make sure that ITS wasn't afraid to charge internal service fees on the finance office.
Oh, they're not.
They're not bashful.
Thank you, Councilman Stein. Councilman Tiger.
Thank you. Rich, refresh my memory what your program revenue charges, commission, and fees, where are your $770,000 of revenue sources?
That's the Treasury. function.
That is a treasury function, okay. There is a notation about the emphasis on selling back tax properties and creating enhanced general fund revenues. What percentage of back taxes and how has that trended over the last period of 3, 4, 5 years? Are we better off, or people still struggling and walking away from properties, et cetera?
I mean, I think we're still collecting roughly the same 99 or 98% that we collect every year, so I don't think there's been any appreciable change in the amount we collect. And obviously I don't have that data with me, but we can get a little more updated data in terms of the back tax. I mean, our goal is obviously, as we do get properties, take them over for foreclosure for back taxes. We're trying to get those turned around and get them back on the tax rolls as quickly as possible. It's obviously a lengthy process, but we've had a staff person directed at that to get as much property off the government's hands back into the private sector that we can. But we can get you some information on that.
Okay. And if my experience or tenure up here has taught me anything, that there's different ways to enact change, and probably the greatest way is through financial incentives and the control of the purse strings. You were up here, Mr. Durbin, I asked him the question about all different departments, elected officials and otherwise, creating their own databases and capturing email addresses and eliminating postage and this whole and Mr. Durbin talked about, well, there have been some cases where people went out on their own and they developed their own system and we could have saved them money and whatnot. Do you have any thoughts or comments on, how we, over time as a government, can more successfully manage our database so we don't have all of these different competing systems out there?
Well, I think, generally speaking, we should move towards a consolidated government approach to it. When I came here, finance had its own IT function, and we have, over the last several years, evolved that into IT, which to me is the proper place for those functions to be. And there's still a few others out there that I think there could be greater consolidation, and I would, I'm going to push Keith, and we'll continue to push Keith to move in that direction. You're obviously going to run into resistance whenever you do that, and it's not easy because people's turfs get stepped on, and sometimes there's legitimate reasons, and sometimes it's just turf reasons, and I think we need to fight through that to try to get as much consolidation, because I think we can save. If you look at the cost of government, I mean, obviously one of the great increases, in your tenure in the council, and going back to when, I was here before with Mayor Fulton, has been the IT cost. I mean, it was a minuscule portion of the budget, and now it's an ever-growing number, and we're just going to have to figure out a way to put some checks on that.
And I think you really hit the nail on the head when you talk about turf wars, but at some point, somebody with a lot more power than me, maybe even you, needs to say, hey, water department, planning commission, and assessor and trustee, all of you all have got these databases of the same people.
Right.
And there's got to be a way to consolidate and to make this thing work for everybody, and eventually, not on the front end, but eventually save a lot of money down the road. And I just think you control the purse strings of some of these folks, and I'm going to continue to badger them, and maybe we can figure something out.
Well, I hope we set an example by that, by consolidating our functions into IT. It just seemed to me to be the right answer. It's worked very well. We get great service. If we have a complaint, we complain and it gets fixed. So I think it's a model that can be copied by other areas of the government, and I will get with Keith and we'll keep moving in that direction, I assure you.
Thank you, Councilman Tiger. Council Lady Langster.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's good to see all three of you all sitting on the hot seat. I like that.
I like my seat over there a lot better.
I know you do. This is not going to be hard, but Mr. Rubin, how does the finance department decide which bank to put the majority of the city's revenue and funding and money in?
We have a banking contract that we put out for proposals every 4 or 5, I guess every 5 years, I think that's right. And so we get proposals from the various financial institutions in town. We have it all, it happens to be at First Tennessee is where the banking relationship is today.
Wow.
You know, we review the proposals and we end up going with whoever is not only the cheapest, but the you know, who provides the most services for us. I think that contract was just re-entered into last year or the year before. I think last year. So we went through an RFP process, and that's how we do it. And most of the idle cash we invest with the state through the state local government investment pool. And so that's where most of our idle cash is invested. And then our banking relationship for debit cards and just financial transactions is currently with First Tennessee.
I see. Does the minority bank here in Davidson County ever respond to the RFP when they go out?
I don't know specifically. I'm guessing, and I'll find this out for a fact, that they're just not big enough to handle the transaction load that we have.
Yes, I understand.
But I will do a little homework and check on that.
Okay, but what about a small pot of money that Metro may have? Maybe they could submit a request and a response to that.
Happy to look into that.
But whatever you can look at and do.
We'll
Thank
happy
you.
to look into that for you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Leinster. Seeing no other council members never mind. Councilor Allen.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Step away from a clean
Sorry.
way.
This may have been asked, and if it has, you can catch me up on it later. I know that we've just okayed another bond issue, and I know that the last several bond issues that we've done have been sort of low on the front end growing, and the reason was to sort of level things out over the long run. But it seems like that's sort of a financial version of kicking the can down the road a little, if I understand it correctly.
Yeah.
Is there sort of a long-range plan to reach the point where the bond issues are even payments so that we're not doing that and having a balloon that comes up later?
I would remind you that we do, you know, a pretty aggressive amortization of our debt. We keep it to 20 years, primarily on the general obligation side, which is, you know, we could do 30, we could actually do longer, but in Tennessee, traditionally you don't do any more than 30, and we keep it at 20, which is on the aggressive side. You know, actually, just as an example, in a memo I sent to you earlier today that outlines the details of the next capital plan, I point out that we're asking for $300 million in authorization for new projects, and I don't anticipate having to issue any new bonds until 2017. And by that time, we will have paid off some $400 million of debt just on our principal repayment schedule. So, you know, I think it's you know, there is a slight cost associated with that when you defer some interest, but again, part of the reason why we're structured that way is in the council prior to this council, when we were facing the economic situation that we were, and we were facing a situation where we had to look at options other than raising taxes, which we didn't think was the right thing to do in a really bad economic environment, and our hands are kind of tied as to what you could do, and one option was to restructure our debt slightly to get through that period, and hopefully times would get better and the economy would be better and stronger. You know, all that has sort of happened. I mean, you know, sometimes you get lucky, sometimes, you know, and it's worked that way. And so, you know, I wouldn't envision, you know, us deferring principal, you know, significantly in the next issue. Our debt sort of caps next year. And then it slowly drops down a little bit. So I think you'll start seeing in the 2017 issue, I would anticipate you'll see sort of a normal amortization schedule of debt.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Allen. Councilman Dominic.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Riebling, we've talked about this several years ago, and Charlie brought up the issue of delinquent taxes and what we do with the houses. Are we still selling our delinquent tax bills? Can you explain the process that goes through and how, as a government, we collect those taxes even after we've sold those to somebody else?
Yeah. A practice that was started about 7 years ago now, maybe 8 years ago. The decision was made by our prior administration to sell the delinquent taxes, receivables. Essentially, what that does is you just basically book it that year, and if you don't do that program, you're going to have to fill a gap in your budget of some $27 million. You'll have a shortfall because you won't have that money for a year. So we've continued the program. Fortunately, interest in that program seems to be actually rising rather than subsiding. We were concerned that we would not get some bids one year, or we'd only have one bid. We actually, I think, got four or five bids this year. We actually get a premium for selling them, so it effectively, works out financially very well for the city, so long as the interest retains in the market. As it relates to the collection of it, nothing changes on that. The city still collects the taxes like they normally would. The link of the property owner pays or doesn't pay, just like they normally would. So we don't. The company that buys receivables has no role in the process of collecting the delinquent taxes. They simply are a financing vehicle. They're paying us the money up front, and then as the money's collected, either through the court action or voluntary payment, it gets turned over to the company.
So we are continuing to collect those revenues, even though we were paid for them in advance.
Well, we collect them, but we turn them over by contract to the third party who paid the receivables.
Has any thought been given to begin to work ourselves out of that position so that we're keeping the full amount, or?
Well, we're actually getting a little premium on now by doing it, so we're actually making a little money by doing this.
Can you get that amount of what we're making, what the premium may be?
What is this year, 3%? I think it was a 3% premium on the amount. So we're, again, the practical problem is if you stop the program today, we say we're not going to do it again, we've got to find $25-ish million in revenue. So, I think we had talked before about perhaps you do it, 10% a year or 20% a year or something like that. And, just in light of the budgets and the needs of the city, and the fact that we are getting multiple bids at a good price, the urgency to do something like that, we just haven't felt it was time to do it.
Yeah, well, I was just wanting to follow up that because I know we'd talked some, and I didn't know what the status was, what we were going to do. But I would think it would be better if we're collecting the money anyway, if we were to keep that money. But that's maybe 3% or whatever it is we get as a bonus is adequate to cover our expenses. But I just thought it might be better if we pursued other options. Thanks. If you can give me the amount we actually receive in bonus, I'd appreciate it.
No problem. We'll do.
Thank you, Councilman Dominy, and Mr. Riebling. Thank you and your team for your service to our city. You made it through another year.
We did. Thank you, Chairman. Members.
You're welcome.
We got everybody to speak. Everybody had to speak today.
You're welcome. Next, we'll have Human Resources and the Metro Benefit Board.